Greetings, everybody, and welcome to the Culinary Conversation presented by World Food Market. I am Nicolo Lianas, the Global Brand Ambassador for the Branca portfolio of spirits, which includes the well-known Fernet Branca, as you can see, always with me. Branca is proud to be the session sponsor of this conversation, and as Branca, we always love to celebrate uniqueness and pioneering because we've been always unique and we've always been the pioneer of this industry since we were born in 1845 thanks to Bernardino Branca in Milano. This year we are celebrating our 175th anniversary, and what a better occasion to do this together. You know us for Fernet Branca, but we are more than that. We are Antica Formula, the Vermouth, and we are of all the Capano range, and the newly born, the Capano Botanic Bitter. So a lot of products, a lot of uniqueness. So today is my pleasure to introduce a unique person, one of the world's best known beverage writers, Thomas Parsons. Brett's multiple award-winning career has helped educate a whole new generation of beverage enthusiasts and raise awareness for bitters and AMARO around the world. He has written about cocktails and the culture of mixology, and also Brett has created a number of cocktails with Fernet Branca, which we are proud of. And today, I'm looking forward to see him demonstrate one of his creations. Here he is now with moderator Mike Jordan, editor of Free List. Enjoy!
Hello again, everybody. I am Mike Jordan, Atlanta-based writer, journalist already. You've seen me here doing Culinary Conversations. Welcome back to Culinary Conversations presented by Whole Foods. We'd also like to shout out our sponsor for this session, Fernet Branca, and also wonderful bookseller here in the Atlanta area, Eagle Eye Bookstore. And I want to make sure that before we say anything else, because we have an outstandingly brilliant writer, award-winning guy, very freshly award-winning guy we hear. He's actually gonna, before we get into talking to him, wanted to let you guys know that there's something special going on at Kimball House out in Decatur. Decatur Book Festival, Decatur Drink Festival. We are actually, if the first 5 people that go to Kimball House mention the Decatur Book Festival, you will get a copy of a book from our wonderful guest here tonight, and his name is Brad Thomas Parsons. Please give him a round of applause. If it's not just me, you can only hear me, but I know everybody downstairs. There you go, Brad. Give yourself a round of applause. That's what they said in Coming to America. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
How are you
Mike?
today?
I'm good. So good to see you and be a part of this book festival. Like I said, I wish I was there in person with everyone, as we all do, but this will do, and we're going to make the most of it and have a good time talking and have a drink or two.
Outstanding. We certainly are. So we got some surprises for everybody, well, in the sense of what we're going to have. But again, if you go to Kimball House this evening, tonight only, and you are one of the first people to mention the Decatur Book Festival, you will get a free copy of Brad Thomas Parsons' cookbook. So make sure you get over there tonight, even if you aren't one of the first 5 people. We all know that they have amazing oysters. Shout out to Miles McQuarrie, good friend of mine. Shout out to all of the cocktails, the absinthe program, great people. Also, if you have a question, which I'm certain that you will, because if you're like me, you like to ask questions about cocktails so you get better at making and drinking them, there's a featured little button right underneath us, and it says ask a question. So go ahead and smash that if you have a question at any time here. And when we get to the end of our conversation, we will make sure to get to as many of those as possible. Also, the Decatur Book Festival is all about accepting donations. We appreciate you. We are supported by the community, and we would love if you were able to donate, that you would do so. You can go down, and also right beneath us, there's a green button, and you can donate there right underneath Brad and I. So please, if you can, donate to Decatur Book Festival. And also, if you have questions, buttons down there as well. And if you can make it to Kimball House, get out there and get yourself a free cookbook. Brad Thomas Parsons is in the house. Now, I'm going to ask you to just tell us a little bit about yourself, as we always do in these kinds of circumstances. But before we get into that, and I know we keep putting things in front of you, I know you're like, it's like when people used to try to hold you back from a fight. You're like, let me go, let me go. But my understanding is that there is a cocktail called Eeyore's Requiem that you are going to make, and I think that it would only be right and proper if you go ahead and give us some magic there.
Yeah, if you were you yourself, Mike, or any of these virtual folks who are walking in my apartment, first thing is let's get a drink in their hand. And so let's do this. This is a drink, great name, Eeyore's Requiem. Everyone knows Eeyore, the sad, depressed. I don't know if he's depressed. I guess he's clinically depressed or anxious donkey from Winnie the Pooh. And the drink kind of sums up, I think, how I've been feeling a lot lately, you know, but it also, it's been a tough time, but this drink was in my book, AMARO. It's created by Toby Maloney, who's a well-known bar owner and barman from Chicago. He's a co-owner of the bar called the Violet Hour, and he also had some work to, had a piece of, I think, Patterson House in Nashville and some other places. And when I asked him about this drink, like, where did the name come from? You know, he was just like, so the book AMARO is a lot of bitter drinks in there. And he thinks Eeyore is the most bitter character in literature. What's his thing? And he's like, so he calls his book, like, he calls his drink a deep, dark Negroni that's been flipped on its head. So essentially, a lot of drinks are Negroni variations, and Negronis normally start with Campari. But tonight, I'm excited we have this hot off this is from Fernet Branca, or Branca USA is our sponsor tonight, and they were kind enough to send this from Carpano, which is part of their portfolio, historic vermouth maker out of Turin. And this is their bitter. So you see a lot of different red bitters out there now, competing with the classic that is Campari. And all of them are, these are you would normally have these, you think of these in spritzes, the Negroni. It's bitter, it's got that red color. This has 10 ingredients. It's a spirit based, and it has a lot of different things in it, like 2 different types of oranges, 3 different bittering agents, wormwood, cinchona bark, and gentian, and it's got myrrh and some other things. So when I tasted it earlier, it has a nice lingering bitter finish, but it also has almost half the sugar of most red bitters. So it comes on kind of dry and nice too. So I'm going to disappear and give you my workstation for just a minute here, so we can do it old school style here. So we have the bitter. We're going to do 1.5 ounces of this.
1.5 ounces, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, 1.5 ounces going in there. And then we're going to have, also from Carpano, their Bianco vermouth. So Bianco vermouth, you probably know dry vermouth and sweet vermouth. Bianco is a semi-sweet vermouth, a lot of floral notes. Sometimes there's some stone fruit in there. This is also by Carpano. And Mike, I know you know, keep your vermouth. This is a brand new bottle. Once I crack this open, it's going right through the refrigerator. It's wine-based. It's wine-based, so you want to treat it like wine. We're going to do a full ounce of the Bianco from Carpano in there.
1.5 ounces earlier, 1 ounce of that. Keep track, folks. Yep. Write this down.
And then we're going to put a little gin in there to give it a kick. Get some foraged gin tonight. This is going to just be a 1/2 ounce. So it's just a little bit in there to give it some backbone. And then the namesake of Fernet Branca, we're going to have some Fernet. And I know we probably talk a little more about this later, but Fernet Branca, it's like a darling of the bar industry and restaurant industry. Branca is the family name. Fernet is the style of Amaro. And this style is normally elevated in proof. So this is higher proof. It's got a dark black color, and it has some common ingredients in it like chamomile, peppermint, aloe ferox, saffron. And in cocktails, it can really take over. So for this one, we're just putting 1/4 ounce. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but it's enough to really change the direction of this drink. And then wouldn't be a cocktail in my house without some bitters. So we're gonna use some orange bitters, 3 good dashes of that.
And make sure they know that's Reagan's, correct?
This is Reagan's bitter. Yeah, we lost Gary Reagan last year, a legend in the bar industry. There's so many. When I wrote bitters, my first book it came out in 2011. Until early aughts, there had only been a handful of orange bitters on the market for decades. And then suddenly, now when you want orange bitters, it's like, not give me an orange bitter, it's like which orange bitters? There's so many out there. So Reagan's is kind of spicy in a spice cabinet kind of way. It has a lot of a nice cardamom taste. Some are very like fresh orange tasting. Some are a little caramelized tasting. So we're just stirring this up to chill it. And then I just took this nice coupe from the freezer. So it's a nice, you don't have to at home, but it's nice to chill your glassware when you're going to present them. And then we're going to pour this in.
Folks, I would recommend freezing your coupe glasses, at least one or two. I would just do it. It's a great thing to do. It's a great thing to do.
Yeah. And then this calls for, it's not a surprise it's going to have an orange twist on there.
Oh, we might get fancy here, folks. We might get.
No, this one, no, that's going to be the second show.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so express and discard is a common bartender term where you you put the oils over it, but then don't put it in the drink. So you put two of those. You express and discard two, and then drop that third one in there. So this is Eeyore's Requiem, and for a bitter donkey, this is a beautiful drink, but it's got a nice complexity to it. Yeah, that's good because the Fernet really has a great backbone to it. That new Bianco bitter, botanic bitter comes through nicely, and a little kick from the gin. So we got a drink in hand now. I'm gonna sit down and then.
I've been chilling one on the side.
What do you got? You got one too.
Get my thing, so I don't have to repeat, and reinvent the wheel. I'm ready right here, and I will express at a later date. Cheers to you, Brad Thomas Parsons. And also, before we take a sip, cheers.
Have a good night, everybody.
Cheers to you winning the Spirited Award at the Tales of the Cocktail for your book Last Call, which we're going to talk about
today. Thank you.
So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was a nice little surprise, start my day with Monday. That's held in New Orleans, and but this year it's held from wherever your laptop is. But it was a great surprise, and really excited about that.
Excellent, man. Well, again, thanks for walking us through that. Everybody, again, if you notice the measurements of things, it was 1.5 to 1 ounce to a half ounce to the bitters. I always think it's interesting. I always ask bartenders what's the right and the wrong amount of bitters, and some say go crazy, but of course, crazy means different things to different folks. So really interesting, and very glad you shared that with us. But again, that's why you need to buy or hurry up and get to Kimball House to receive for free one of the Thomas Parsons. Awesome.
I don't know which one. I don't know if they've got AMARO or Last Call there, but I had a nice they're in Last Call, Kimball House and Ticonderoga Club, and I've known Miles and Greg for a long time, and so we had an event there. I did a Southern swing on the book tour. We did I think 8 cities or so coming down through the South, and had a blast in Decatur for the event. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, Greg Best, everybody over at Ticonderoga Club, Paul Carroll, that whole clique. Make sure you go by there. Again, I would say, unlike anybody else, Greg Best is probably the man that you want to say has actually been responsible for Atlanta drinking as much Fernet Branca as we do. I know for sure I drink a lot of it. Matter of fact, I prefer a Branca Menta. So that's
me too, man. Yeah. I've got one. Yeah, one of my favorites. You can't really call it a drink. It's in AMARO. I have a section called 50/50s, which bartenders like to just combine 2 AMAROs together and usually have a creative name. So like Fernet and Campari is the Ferrari, and sort of like Electric Company, with the words come together. But my friend Damon Bolte, who is a Brooklyn bartender, created a drink called the Hard Start, which is Branca Menta, equal parts Branca Menta and Fernet Branca, and that's just a beautiful shot because they tame each other well. And at this double magnum I have up here, it's empty now, but that was filled with Hard Starts. We drank the first bottle of Fernet from that, and then filled it for Hard Starts for events I had. Because you don't see a lot of Mentas. It's one of the only Fernet's one of the few in the States. In Italy, you see more variations of Menta being a common kind of flavor. It's just a little bit lower in alcohol, a little sweeter, and has that peppermint oil, but it's lovely, especially like over ice. Or in Italy, they often drink it over crushed ice, like at barbecues and things.
Right.
I've been told. So
Right. Digestif. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, before we both get into our own, like incredible Fernet Branca, and again, shout out to them. They're getting way more money out of this than we probably gave them. But no problem, Fernet Branca. We love you. Keep sending us stuff. Keep paying the bills. We're with you. Now, Brad, I wanted to just kind of because anyone who wants to learn about you can obviously pick up the books. There's an About You section on your website, btparsons.com, if I'm correct. But in your words, now that you've had a sip or two of a cocktail you just made, really, who would you say Brad Thomas Parsons is? And also, while we're at it, how did you become a person who can speak so easily to bartenders and mixologists and cocktail craftspeople and get them to speak back to you?
I mean, the truth serum is now they've had a couple sips. I love the second part of that question, especially, but I live in Brooklyn. I've been here about 10 years. I lived in Seattle for 10 years, and I always wanted to be a writer. My only bartender experience was in my summer jobs in college during the summers at this beach bar in upstate New York called Harpoon Eddie's, and that was in the 90s. So mixology wasn't at its finest moments then, but I loved being behind the bar. And then I got into I always wanted to write about food, but then I was working at Amazon in Seattle for a long time. I was their cookbook editor, and there's no free time in a job like that. But near the end of my tenure there, I wanted to I said, okay, I'm getting older. I want to still be a writer. And I reached out to a local magazine there, Seattle Metropolitan, and for some food stories. And they're like, this is about 2008. And they were like, we actually need some cocktail stories. And because things were really, becoming interesting then. And so I wrote a couple stories, and the second one I wrote was on bitters, and it was only a 500-word piece, but I got obsessed with it and couldn't shake it. And that turned into writing a book proposal over the summer because I saw there was nothing out there on it. So that was my entryway into it in terms of putting my flag in the sand of being like, I'm going to write about drinks, because I went into it thinking I want to write about food, but then drinks allowed me to go down these rabbit holes and obsess over things, and whether it's an obscure ingredient like bitters or, the history of AMARO, or just, a great whiskey sour. So I think I feel like I'm a bit of a late bloomer in life, and I kind of, I like living in New York, but there's times where I'm like, what am I doing here? I could be anywhere doing this, especially now when it has that itch where I could be anywhere. But there's something about, as cliche as it is, like being here in the city opened a lot of opportunities for me. And I'm lucky that a lot of drinks action happens here. It happens all over America now, but I'm fortunate that a lot of Italians come through New York, the producers, and I get to meet them. So I kind of, I got an MFA in writing and fiction. I've never published a word of fiction, so maybe down the road that could be something. But for now, I like this bitter corner I've kind of established a beachhead in, writing about this category and becoming a bit of an authority in it. In terms of bartenders, I think the biggest thing I learned, like I said, when I was in Seattle from 99 to early 2010, a lot was happening in the drink scene then, and suddenly new AMAROs were appearing behind bars, new bitters, new spirits. And something my dad taught me years ago, I think when I went to summer camp once, he's like, just listen, keep your mouth quiet and just listen. And so I found listening but asking questions of bartenders at the right time was an unofficial education, where it's a slower night, early in the shift, later in the shift. You say, what's that thing in the green bottle? Oh, that's Fernet Branca. Or what's the red bottle? And they offer you a little taste. And then that establishes a routine, and you become a regular. So I love just hanging out. I couldn't work a shift behind a bar. I obviously create drinks and recipes at home, but I'm beyond the age where I can work at a bar full shift. But I love the feeling of embedding myself, so to speak, at a bar stool and just watching the action. And I can go in a different city and they'll know within 5 minutes, either by what I ordered or what I'm looking at that well, are you in the industry? Like they assume I'm in the industry. So I guess I have bad tells, to speak poker, but yeah, I just love like listening to bartenders. Working on Last Call, there's so many late nights around the country, really gave me a taste of that life where people are not getting home till 4 a.m. and plus, and that's just like regular, not just out partying. That's just like shutting down the bar and going home, depending on what time Last Call is. And that nearly killed me and my photographer, Eddie Anderson. Like we felt like Danny Glover, where in Lethal Weapon, we're getting too old for this shit. So it was, So I think like, so I think establishing that trust, through whether it's through writing or through books or just being a good person at the bar and not, and it's hard because I'm not a critic, so I'm not anonymous. I don't, and that could be problematic sometimes if you're doing a story and you don't include a certain bar, or I don't mention a certain new Amaro in a roundup. I'll get a text from someone, and I try to be, whether it's Italian or American, I write about, it's collaborative when you work with an editor too, but I write about what I want to write about. I think some of my more successful stories have been the ones that have a little personal narrative behind them as well, to like my education of like, like how my dad drank and how I drink and how they're symbolically still related. I like getting a little sentimental and nostalgic in the stuff I do, but I also like taking these subjects like bitters or Amaro, and a word I use a lot is demystify, like take these complicated subjects and make them accessible to people and not talk down to them, but appeal that sweet spot of bartenders and cocktail geeks and people who just pick up the book and say, oh, this says pretty pictures, and then it happens. But the biggest reward for me is people text me from around the world like a picture of bitters or Amaro behind a bar in Tokyo or London and in LA, and that just makes me so happy that these works aren't disposable, so to speak. They're gonna stick around a while. So, long answer. Sorry, Mike. But yeah, but.
Oh, no. I have a beverage right here, and I hope everyone else has followed the directions and made a beverage as well. So this is one of those conversations. There's a lot to be discussed. So thank you. And I wanted to talk about that going into, again, these books aren't disposable. Quite to the contrary, these are award-winning books. You are an award-winning author, multiple award-winning author. I wanted to ask you, at what point of the process of writing these books about these very specific kind of areas of cocktail craftspersonship, when did you know they were special, if you did? When did you get a vibe that maybe one day in the future people would be sending you text messages about bitters that they saw around the world? Like, at what point did you start to get a feeling that this was something that, oh wow, I have something really electric, or did you know all along?
No, I think with bitters. So my first book, like I said, that came out in 2011. I think I, sold the contract or sold the book around 2009 or 8. So 9 probably. So we did like 2 years of, I did 2 years of working on it, but just seeing at the bar, like going, it's a cliche now, but like there would be an army of these bitters bottles like behind bars, and those weren't there before. Like when you're going, from college, you don't remember those from college. You don't remember those out. And suddenly I'm like, what's this Dasher bottle? What's this eye drop bottle? And there was a lot of new brands coming out. There were new flavors, and that really fascinated me. And I wasn't prescient by any way. I just sort of wanted to talk about what was going on and help people understand how to use these. But it's ironic too, or interesting too, that for all these dozens of different flavors and producers out there now, most bartenders are using like Angostura, Peychaud's, and orange bitters. If they have a specific drink that calls for a certain bitters, they'll use it. But like I used to have a whole Metro shelf of bitters, and now I have like a little tray over there of the ones that interest me. So not be like what did I rot, but it's sort of like I don't ever need to buy another bottle of bitters, but I'm still fascinated to buy it. But at the same time, when I was working on that, Amaro was still, no one really knew what was going on there beyond bartenders or Italians or Italian restaurants would bring over like Sambuca or Limoncello and maybe a Fernet. But when my agent at the time was like, I want to include I wanted bitters and Amaro in one big book, and he was like, no one knows what Amaro is. No one knows what bitters is, let alone Amaro. Take a breather. And I was going to go a different direction. So after bitters, came out pretty strong. It's still doing well. It's almost, it's 9 years old now, this fall, and still, like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like, it's out of date in many aspects because there's so many new bitters out there. Any book you write is out of date the second you turn in the manuscript, but people are still going for it. AMARO, that was a perfect pairing for me. This kind of connection between, this bitters, or this kind of American story of snake oil salesman and patent medicine to essential cocktail ingredient. Bitters is in the definition of the word cocktail. Sugar, spirit, waters, bitters. And then AMARO, like Averna and many others, these are a European, Italian tradition, but they often use the same ingredients. It's just different ways. One is non-potable, using dashes or drops like a flavoring, and one is potable. You sip neat around the rocks. But what really was going on with AMARO was bartenders, those wonderful bartenders, these ambassadors, were using AMARO in cocktails, which was something that really wasn't happening in Italy beyond the aperitivo culture. There's only a couple of classic cocktails, the Hanky Panky and the Toronto, that both call for Fernet, but just a bar spoon, like less than a quarter ounce. And now we have these like super bitter or bittersweet drinks. Bitters, AMARO can introduce an herbaceousness, a bitterness, a sweetness. So I just really, in AMARO especially, like traveling to Italy, working on the book in Italy and getting to meet people whose names are on the bottle, fourth, fifth, sixth generation producers, they were very skeptical of, why are you interested in this? No one cares about this. And it's funny, for AMARO especially, that came out in 2016. And I've had people like, oh, your book should have came out this year because AMARO's everywhere now. And so it's sort of like a rising tide lifts all boats, like more Amari was coming into America. The book was out. They were kind of a nice pair. And then all the bartenders were into it. And so now, there's still, like, if you poll 10 people in a restaurant and ask, what's AMARO? Maybe 6 or 7 might not know, unless, depending where you are. So I can't fool myself. I know I'm a 1% or 2% kind of bar geek that knows all of this stuff, but it's important for me I do a lot of classes and talks with restaurants and bars, and a big part of it is how to welcome the guest into that experience, not just drop the 25 item Amari list with no explanation with all these strange names, but bring the bottle over, show them so they know where it's from, and there's the bottles of all these different beautiful experiences, and just help them without talking down to them. So so kind of like, I never knew, like, and after those 2 books, that's when it was like, now what? And everyone wanted another, like, you should do vermouth, you should do aquavit. They wanted me to be the single subject guy. And I took a different direction. I've got this little side hustle book I didn't have up there, but distillery cats. I wrote this fun little book on cats that live in breweries and distilleries or work. But Last Call was that started on the back of a cocktail napkin with my publisher. We're having a drink and had one of those elevator pitches of what's next. And those 2 words together just meant so much and had so much double meaning and weight to them. It's like mortality. It's the literal last call. It's the end of the guest night with this transition to the bartender's night. So just opened this up and really got me going. So now it's a whole different direction with that kind of book. So I'm not saying I will never go back to a single spirit subject book, but after, bitters and AMARO complement each other very nicely. But AMARO, I'm grateful for bitters, but like, that was my first book. And when you don't know what you're doing writing a book, it's still, writing a book is a miserable experience. It's like, I'm grateful, don't get me wrong, but a book deadline is the worst deadline. And there's nothing romantic about writing it and being late. I love the research. I love talking to people. I love all the interviews. And then when it's time to actually get in there, and with AMARO especially, there's not a lot of rules for the category. Even still, it's not like wine or bourbon and whiskey and rye. There's all this kind of like, what makes an AMARO, what makes this kind. Some are ingredient driven, some are from certain territories or regions. So I had to like world build a bit when I dug into writing that book, and that took months and months to just, okay, what are the rules of this book that I'm going to follow? This kind of, I call it this bitter umbrella that things are under. So I can talk about Jägermeister. I can talk about Italian Amari. I can talk about, if it intentionally was made to be bitter, it was sort of fair game. But Italians will be like, no, it must be made in Italy to be called AMARO. They'll tell me that all the time. So yeah, so kind of like, I stumbled into it, so to speak, but then I kind of was obsessed with it and then put my flag in the sand. And there's other books on the topic, of course, out there now, but I'm really proud of these two, and AMARO especially, just from all the legwork and the first primary resource, talking to people. And whenever I'm lucky to get back to Italy, I always try to go to somewhere I haven't been and meet a new producer, and it's very exciting.
This is all, I mean, again, this is all stuff that when we think about modern cocktails, when we think about classic cocktails, when we think about just the art of having a beverage, you know, whether it's happy hour or it's a celebration of another sort or just a drink, there's just, I've always been sort of enamored by the fact that there was so much more to learn, there's so much more to discuss, that it can sound, I think, sometimes to people as if all of these things don't really have the impact that you do. You know, I think that some people may get the aspect of deep diving into bitters and deep diving into Amaros and deep diving into vermouths and all these things can get a little too grainy. But the truth of it is that, especially with the time that we're living in right now, with the pandemic and being at home, there's so much that you can learn that can, I believe, bring us all into this idea of saying, let me get my home bar correct, because I would like to have an experience that's enjoyable. And then also there's a shared experience that it still brings forward some of that communal thing of, this is still the classic. This is still something that people are drinking. There is a new beverage that's coming around that someone in a place that is respected or someone out of the blue came up with. So there's just a lot to look at, and that brings it into the overall culture that I always like to look at. So thinking about the culture of these cocktails and imbibing and drinking, being someone who wrote a book about last calls is something that struck me personally, because I bartended for a long time. And when I bartended, I remember there was a gentleman who used to come into the bar where I would pour drinks, and I would always do off menu things. And, you know, people would come back to me because they would ask me for things that were not available. And so I would always kind of sneak some stuff into my own portfolio. And a gentleman used to come in, and I knew he would always have a rusty nail and a glass of red wine. And that's how you knew he was done for the evening. And just from that, he was intriguing to me. So I wanted to talk about sort of what, in a synopsis sort of way, and of course to get people to go and purchase this book, what is it about that last call moment that is so spiritual, and it has that bit of an ending and looking forward, but also looking backward? What is it about that kind of like struck you and said, this is a book that needs to be out into the universe?
Yeah, I think, you know, it turned out to be a much darker book than I think the publisher intended, in terms of not philosophical, but this is the first book where, you know, everything's great now, but like when you're writing a book, you turn in progress material. And that was the first book where my editor was like, this is different than what we thought it was going to be. And I had to go back and like scratch, you know, everything I submitted and redo it, because it's just, a book is collaborative. So they needed to have those drink recipes. It wasn't just Miller High Life and shots, and they needed some recipes. And I need to bring my word count in a bit to hit the page count. But for me, you know, I write about the introduction. Like I always encourage people, like I set the book up like a mixtape where ideally, you know, you're pressing that tape into that person you love, or that person you have a crush on. You want them to listen to it, and it's set up a certain way. Start off strong, you know, end certain points. But it's also a book you can dip into. Like, oh, I live in Atlanta, let me flip to Ticonderoga Club. Or I live in Seattle, let me check out, you know, Canlis. But the introduction, I encourage everyone to read. Don't just skip it over, because it really sets the tone. And I was turning 50 when I was writing this, and so mortality was on my mind. And like, you know, my father's gone, and I think about him a lot. And so I started in kind of this philosophical place of like, last call to me was like, you know, in 2018 and even 2019, you know, every year, but there was a year where we were losing a lot of bartenders, well-known bartenders, from different causes, whether from drugs or suicide to natural causes. But there was a lot of a reckoning of the need to be more mindful of this profession and take care of yourself. And so I was thinking about that a lot. And in terms of just, there's like one person I knew, this guy, Rocky Yee in Seattle, a well-known bartender, and just, he was a brand rep eventually, but he was like a cocktail nerd. And he went out the night before, and like, you never know when your last call drink is. So it's sort of a parlor game to ask, like, all right, what's your last call drink? If you had one more drink, what would it be? That's a fun little parlor game. But the dark side of that too is something like, you never know when you step out the door, go to bed at night, all that stuff. So it started in a darker place. But to me, it was fascinating. I wanted to do high-low, from dive bars to restaurant bars. Like there's Canlis in Seattle, which is a high-end hospitality-driven bar. And their level of the things you don't see going on behind the scenes that affect the guests was just fascinating. And how a place where they're wearing beautiful suits and ties do last call versus Ernestine and Hazel in Memphis, where this haunted honky tonk, where it took me weeks and weeks to even just be granted access to talk to them for the book. And she's like, Bud Light was her last call drink, and I'm like, why? It's like, cold, good. And it's like, all right. And I sort of like, and you could tell, this woman had told us about her life, and I think 12 people have died in that bar.
Freaky place. I've been.
Yeah.
Freaky place. Freaky place.
So that ain't no parlor game. That's like, you've lived a hard life if you're working there for 10 years. And so for that, got a pass. But it was fascinating, sort of, there's a couple different martinis in the book, but they have a story behind them. So like, this is the way my dad made his martini, or this is the absolutely last thing. So a lot of people did treat it as, gun to my head, here's what I would drink if I'm going to the great beyond, or versus, because I wanted last call too to be a bit amorphous, where is it your shift drink? Is it the best drink you made that represents your career? Is it, I know too, like I know when I do events or talks, I just want a cold Pilsner at the end of it, or a short glass of beer, a bottle of beer. I don't need a fancy sour cocktail or shake and drink. And that makes me happy. So it was interesting to see that, but also just kind of this, and we went on the road. We visited every bar. I think we went to, there's 40 profiles in the book, but we went to over 85 bars around America. And that took its toll, but it was really fascinating. And then I kind of replicated going on the book tour last fall, visiting a lot of these places again with the book in hand was a different experience. But it was like, it was more, this was sort of, it was a different shift from what I had written about. And some people went through that journey, some people didn't. But I think for me, it was a love letter to bartenders. And I think that really comes through. And especially when COVID hit and suddenly every bar was closed, and many still are, and some unfortunately forever. I get a lot of nice emails now from people saying like, hey, I picked up your book, and it's taken on this added layer of poignancy now that it's a time capsule in a certain respect, this armchair travel wish list.
I will say that what your point about the darkness of it again, and you can see the book, folks, Last Call. So again, it has a mood. There's a vibe all the way in here with my man with the shadow over here. I mean, I love this book, but I do think it's a book for our times in a lot of senses, and not to say that we're living in more morbid times than we all know that is the case, but there is a loneliness that's out there. There is a what's coming next, and I think it's just one of those things to where when you think about the relationship between spirits and cocktails, and when people are dealing with these things, I think the conversations that I read in Last Call and what people had to say about that was really, in a very ironic way, perhaps uplifting. And it was kind of like, there was, even though we are talking to people who may be at low points, we may be talking to people who don't know what they're going to see tomorrow in the future or what's going on. There's still sort of a thing of someone's here with you and someone's making sure you're okay. And it's not just that snake oil salesman. It's not just that, bad doctor who's just throwing you some quacky, elixir that's supposed to cure all, but it's just something of a communal experience once again. I wanted to pause for a second only because I believe that you have a second cocktail that has something to do with that San Francisco side of town. So tell us a little bit about what's about to happen.
Yeah, I'm going to I hit my freezer, but give me 1 sec.
I certainly will. He's going to hit his freezer, ladies and gentlemen. And while he's hitting his freezer, I'm going to hit my Boulevardier. Oh.
Yeah, you got to keep that glassware chilled. So yeah, so I'm going to disappear for a second. This is a drink. Well, I'll tell you first. So this is a drink called the San Francisco Treat. You know, so if you know, growing up of a certain age, the Rice-A-Roni commercials, that jingle was always playing. And this is a drink. Yeah, it's in my book AMARO. It's created by a bartender named Sam Levy. He used to be at the restaurant at Meadowood in St. Helena, California, which is this like Michelin-starred fine dining restaurant. And when you walk in the restaurant, you start at the bar. And this drink was a little something he used to have for guests when they come back on their way out. So it's in the digestif spectrum a little bit, and it also features Fernet. So we're going to start. Put some ice in our mixing glass. My hands are clean, folks. And it's just for me.
Get yourself a mixing glass, folks. You will never regret it. Get yourself a mixing glass.
Yeah, you could use a pint glass, but these Yari style, I have a couple of these Japanese style ones are just great and sturdy, and they can take a little bit of a beating. So this is going to be like a Negroni build, equal parts of, we're going to start with our friend Fernet Branca, and we're going to put a full ounce in here. You don't see many cocktails with a full ounce of Fernet Branca in there, so it's really going to let itself be known. And so we'll start with an ounce of that. And then we are going to go to another AMARO. So this is from northern Italy in Milan. And now we're going to go down to Sicily for Averna, which is a lot of people's kind of one of the first Amari they might try. It's, I call it like a Goldilocks AMARO. It's not too bitter, not too sweet, just right. But it's a classic Sicilian style. So in Sicily, the AMARO tends to be a little sweeter, and it kind of highlights that beautiful abundance of oranges. So this has Mediterranean herbs, but orange and lemon and pomegranate essence in it. It's definitely bittersweet, and sometimes there's some cola notes to it. So we're gonna drop an ounce of Averna. So we have two big AMARO blasts in there right out of the gate. So we're definitely not using AMARO as a modifier here. These are the base ingredients. And then we're gonna go back to Carpano and use Bianco, which is an interesting touch there. Cause like this would be a 50-50 right now. And now we're making it a proper cocktail, you know, by adding an ounce of this semi-sweet, very floral, beautiful vermouth. And we just stir it up.
I want to ask you, while you're stirring, is there a proper amount of times to stir this cocktail?
No, I mean, some people say, like, you'll see some books or bars say 15 times or 30 times. It's till it's chilled. So like when you feel it, you know, when you have a mixing tin, you know, from shaking it, like the condensation gets on it. So it's chilling it, but it's also diluting. So, you know, we have three heavy viscous ingredients in there now. So adding a little of this water to it. So, and I don't have, most bartenders, right, they would have a little straw, they would taste. I didn't do that for you tonight, but that's
we got COVID going on, so we want to make sure everybody feels comfortable what's going on here.
so now Sam serves the drink just neat in a glass like this, so it's like a nice sipper. You could put a big rock in there if you want, but I'll respect what he did. So we're just gonna pour this in there, and then this is where you probably won't see the action, but I'm a little nervous. He calls for a flamed orange peel, so we're gonna do our best to try that.
You got it, brother. I got you. We're gonna like.
We'll try it. I'll see.
Imagine my Boulevardier breath like coming into there as well, and kind of helping with the boozy steam that's going to be necessary. But that does not account for your old matches, though.
I know. I got some old matches. All right, 1 second. We get another
Hey,
crazy.
Shout out to Ford Fry, who has matches in all of his restaurants and bars. I think Kimball House. I don't know, Palazzi. There we go.
No, I got some
matches in your bars, ladies and gentlemen. Have matches.
All right,
here we go.
I don't know if it works. Yeah, you can't see out the way, but you kind of express it in there, and it gets a little of the, and then you discard it. So we're just putting that in there, and so this is kind of a, you know, nice little sipper. So picture yourself, you've had a nice dinner, and you linger with this for a little bit.
What's the profile? What is that? What's going on in there?
It's definitely the Fernet. You know, the kind of Fernet is people say this it's in a nice way, but it has this kind of mentholated aspect to it in its profile. It's strong, but it's very medicinal. So a little bit of that mentholated peppermint spearmint kind of taste comes through, and it balances with the sweetness of the Averna for sure. Yeah, it's just a nicer way, more complex way instead of just pouring a glass of Amaro, which is perfectly fine. But it's a nice way to have it where you can linger over this and have a sip or two.
Excellent.
I better stop. Yeah, that's good stuff. So that was a San Francisco treat. Sam Levy, he's now at a different bar in Northern California called Fern Bar, but he's a good guy. And so I was glad to have his contribution in the book for sure. So yeah, so we have two technically up drinks. We got, well, I guess they call it the down drink when you serve it in a rocks glass without ice. So one down, one up, and yeah, there we go.
Cheers, brother.
Cheers.
All right, Brad, we actually have some questions for you, so I'll let you.
Oh, wow. All right.
And we're going to get right into question number one, which is you as a writer, you as someone who, you will probably appreciate this, I'm sure. Do you have any favorite novels in which food and drink have a meaningful role? I love that question.
That's a great question. One thing it's someone who, when I worked at, well, I don't know if it'll be a long answer, but when I worked at Amazon, and worked in publishing for a few years, you're reading for work nonstop. You've got like 3-4 manuscripts, galleys, books. And when I started writing books, I kind of stopped reading for pleasure, and I know it's awful to say as a writer. I read a lot online and things, but COVID has changed that. I'm reading more, but I would say like it is kind of. I mean, I got to say the first books I remember, I know there's issues with him, but in high school, reading Ernest Hemingway, like all of his Farewell to Arms, and where these moments of when they're enjoying the food they're eating, like whether it's crusty bread or a certain dish when they're traveling. Those were the first ones where I kind of like, hey, I like that. But I just read Lisa Donovan's book. I don't can't remember the title. Something about. I'm sorry, Lisa. It's a memoir. She's a baker and pastry chef, and it's just sort of this beautiful take into the food world. But I would say in terms of novels, like Hemingway was one I definitely remember, and then I got definitely into food memoirs from Tony Bourdain and things like that, where the highs and lows of the ugliness of food, but also the reality of food, but that kind of romance of food. I think it's dangerous to like fetishize food, and I don't like fine dining a lot. Like I've had as many fine dining meals as I need, but I respect restaurants high and low, but I just want a bowl of cacio e pepe or a great burger. So, but I would say, yeah, it's not a great answer. I'm sorry. I know you're someone who has a writing background, but in terms of, yeah, so I would say Hemingway, definitely a Farewell to Arms, and there were some other some of the short stories too, where there's just little moments. It's not about the food, it's just but that reality. Let's stop and break some bread, literally, like crusty bread, and especially Farewell to Arms, where he's a soldier and having that beautiful food, like it changed what was going on in the story.
Excellent.
But great question, yeah.
Yeah, that was. I loved it. Second one, and we got a few more coming after it. Who has your favorite Amari program in the country?
Oh, what bar? That's a great question. It definitely, yeah, I've always asked what's my favorite AMARO, and that one I always plead the fifth because it's all about, where you are, who you're with, time of day, what you're feeling. I mean, Southern Teague in New York City, Amori Amargo was one of the first bitters bars in the country in the East Coast. He has a different kind of cocktail program in terms of no juices, no shaken drinks. I like more. I'm drawn, and I've spent plenty of time there. I would say there's a bar in Seattle called Barnacle, and they're featured in AMARO. It's Chef Renee Erickson has a restaurant called The Walrus and the Carpenter, which is this people line up for as an oyster bar. And she opened this little annex, which she saw as her kind of aperitivo bar. So it mixes up vermouth and Amari, and it's only got like 10 seats on the counter. And it's just this magical little place. So I really like that. I think the thing about how people interpret Amaro in America, it's not how they do it in Italy. So America's about, look at this wall of every, like my shelf behind me. We have every Amaro we've ever seen. Here's some vintage stuff, and here's some weird stuff. In Italy, it's a few bottles by the espresso machine normally. It's so I go between the two of what I like. But I would say there, you don't have to have every Amaro under the sun to be a great Amaro bar. You have to be the people that are knowledgeable, and even places like Lilia in Williamsburg, this great Italian restaurant I like, Maialino. So I'm drawn to more of the Italian places that have a good bar program versus a straight up Amaro bar. Because often, like I said, I want a Pilsner, I want a beer. I don't always want bitter. But I would say, and I list a bunch in the book, and when I do talks, I have like this giant list of like 20 places. But I think they're all over the place. Like Abe Fisher in Philadelphia, it's known for kind of Jewish style smoked meats and deli, but they have all this crazy Amaro because it cuts through all that great fat food at the end of the dinner. So they're all over the place. It's not just New York and Chicago and LA. And I gotta say, last but not least, it should have been the first one, Billy Sunday in Chicago.
Oh yeah.
I should have opened with that. That's an amazing place. And they're a place that doesn't have every Amaro, but they have all the Amaro you've never heard of and all the vintage stuff. And you can pay $20 for a pour. You can pay hundreds of dollars for a pour. You can take a little adventure. So that's in Chicago, and it's amazing. Billy Sunday.
Great place to get a Negroni, folks. Make sure if you're in Chicago, do not miss Billy Sunday. I completely sign that. And as a guy who drinks Negronis and Boulevardiers pretty much as a standard, I'm a big fan of Billy Sundays. People don't even, you wouldn't know that I've written about Billy Sundays because I have not put my name on some things. But anyway,
cosign.
Question for you. Do you let bartenders recommend drinks for you? And if so, what has been the biggest surprise?
Great question. I mean, I'm always, like I think if I'm going into a bar, it's great, Chris. I love these questions. Thank you for those questions. Sincerely, when you do these, sometimes you don't get any. So I really appreciate these smart questions.
People are drunk by the time that, you know what I mean? Like we've gotten through our conversation and now they're just like, what should I drink? But no, that was I think these are great questions.
Now I can't answer them. Yeah, I think like when I go to a bar, if it's one I haven't been to before, I always try to order something off the cocktail list because it's something the team spent a lot of time putting together. There's a reason for it. So I might not say, I might want a Boulevardier, but let me see what they have in that vein that they're doing. Because there's usually different takes of like your Manhattan take, your martini take, and kind of gauge the place. I'm often asked if I might, people want me to try something they're working on. So I have tasted a lot of drinks in development. But normally people are trying to stump the band with Amaro with me. It's like, have you heard this one? Have you heard that one? And there's so many out there now where I have a few holes in my repertoire, and it's kind of interesting when someone does find a bottle. But normally it's less about the cocktail and more about the end of the Amaro service where people a bartender would want to put a little extra effort into impressing the bitter guy, but I would say, mostly like, I've had, I think bartenders are really good at like, if you order, say, a vodka drink, they might steer you towards an aquavit drink just because it's like try this instead. And people can drink whatever they want. But I think, I usually know what I want going in, but if it's a new place, I'll try something new. But I'm always open for suggestions, but not one drink really stands out. Like it could be anything from like an espresso martini, which who really orders those now, maybe, but I see them everywhere, like Dante in New York, the world's best bar. They have a beautiful one, and there's all this care and behind the scenes stuff going into it. And when I was in Maine for the book for Last Call, Portland, Maine, actually the cover of the book is Andrew Volk. He's the co-owner of that bar, Portland Hunt and Alpine Club. Maine sells the most Allen's coffee flavored brandy, which is made in Boston, but it's this down market, not great thing, but Mainers love it. And so he wanted to make me a drink with that. And it was like an espresso martini using that. And it was amazing, but I don't have that history or background for that. So I love mostly when I'm being turned on to if I'm in a new state or city, what they're drinking locally that I might not have. Like the classic is like Malort in Chicago, which is kind of just crazy bad. But
I
that's where there's a thing about Malort where they say no one's ever paid for it. It's always like
yeah.
given to you or
Oh, you pay for it. No.
You
Everyone
pay.
has paid for
True.
Malort.
I got a bottle
Everyone
back
who's
there.
had Malort has paid for Malort. Yeah.
Yeah. But I
Yeah.
kind of like there's certain like I don't drink a lot of mezcal and tequila, but mezcal is in every cocktail now, and so I'll like certain things with it. But like the mezcal Negroni is amazing. But yeah, I like being surprised if someone will say either I'm working on this or this is something. One of the perks of this what I do and is like if it's right now like people are turning their fall menu, so maybe getting a taste of something from the upcoming menu before it goes live for feedback, but also as a little sneak peek. So I know it's kind of annoying, but I dig that kind of stuff.
We got a really good question here. How does the glass choice impact the drink? And I think that's just good because, again, even when I was looking at your mixing glass and looking at my own, and you see this kind of design to where it's almost like this pyramid kind of thing that's coming out, and you see that on a lot of cocktail glasses. So I've always wondered, like, what's going on with that? Right. It's there. So how does that impact?
Was the question about the drinking glass or the mixing glass?
No, the question was about the drinking glass, but
okay,
it just made me think about my question earlier. And just again, like I have a lot of those, the same kind of crystal glasses with that diagonal, like hexagonal kind of thing. So
I think for the mixing glass part, I think COVID and being at home, stay at home early on proved you don't need all the fancy stuff. You can use a mason jar to shake a drink. You can use a coffee tumbler to strain something. So it's about making do with what you have. Obviously at a bar, there's nice presentation in this instead of, but I think like there's things out like that. Like I don't have them out right now, but I use, I'll show you. People know the Boston shaker, which is a classic tin. And then when I grew up, like a pint glass you put on. And now like tin on tin is what most people use. And that's about practicality. It sticks better. It's easy to get apart. It's also safety. You don't have broken glasses flying around when you're shaking drinks. So some of it it's about the way things feel in the hand. Like this obviously started as like, you could use a pint glass. I could have used a pint glass tonight to make these drinks. They'd be delicious. But when you have this out on your bar cart, or you have people over, or if you're at a bar, that works. In terms of drinking glasses, there is like sort of like rules or suggestions for certain kind of drinks, get certain kind of glasses. So whether it's served on the rocks, neat, or up, like this coupe we used to earlier, we could have used a Nick and Nora, which I won't give it. It's a smaller coupe with a narrower cup. You could use the big old school martini
like
glass.
A bell, right? Like it kind of comes down like a floral kind of thing.
Yeah, I'll get one.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. All the show and tell. I like this. Yeah. So this is
ladies, gentlemen.
That's a Nick and Nora right there. So
yes.
It's kind of it's so it's the same thing.
So why not that? So why even? I think maybe what that person, if I can assume for them, which I'm sorry if I'm getting this wrong, but why not that instead of the coupe? What do you like?
Well, this is technically, for serving up, it really is like I do like Nick and Nora's. You see these a lot in bars now for martinis, even Manhattans. It's the same amount. It looks smaller, but it's holding the same amount of booze. Coupes for me too. I could tend to spill those a little more, when you're talking and holding them. So this, has a little more height to it. But in terms of like the Negroni Spagliato is a drink I love, and that's a Negroni instead of gin, it's made with Prosecco, and that's traditionally served in a spritz-like glass, a stemmed wine glass. And I love it in a rocks glass. And it's not about it being manly and like I don't want a stemmed drink, but it's just about the way it feels. And I like my Americanos. I like a lot of drinks like this universal DOF, double old fashioned glass. This is my favorite drinking glass for, you could put AMARO in there, you could have whiskey in there, you could have old fashioned, a Negroni. But like there was a Momofuku Sambar used to serve all their drinks in this kind of glass, like martini would be in this glass. And a purist might say that's not right. It needs to be in a certain kind of glass. So I think rules are meant to be broken, but things make sense. The ice, like if you had a big block of ice, you want to make sure it's a glass that fits it, that's not sticking out. if you have garnishes, you have to account for a garnish might lay in a coupe better than it does in a Nick and Nora. So there's different considerations. And if you have a menu from a professional point of view, you want to shake up. You don't want everyone drinking out of the same glass. So you would have like maybe a mug glass, a tiki style, a double old fashioned, a custom glass. So it's like you see different things at the bar. And I like when menus even show a little diagram of what glass comes with it. Again, it's not about questioning masculinity or anything. It's more about, which a lot of people unfortunately do, like give it to me in a man's glass. But yeah, so I think there's rules for like, just like when you shake or stir, what kind of glass you would use. But I like a Manhattan on the rocks occasionally in a rocks glass. Martinis, that can happen too. My friend Robert Simonson wrote a book on martinis, and it's about knowing the rules before you can break them. But if you like it a certain way, then that's the way to drink it. Ultimately, at home especially.
I always point people back to Frank Sinatra. I'm a big classic man, as the song goes. I love Miles Davis. I love Frank Sinatra. They both had some dating there's a lot going on in those days, but
yeah.
I love this one quote from Frank Sinatra, and I'm going to end it here, is that he liked to wear pink, and he was just like, if you're a man, he was like, what are you afraid of? And I always love that quote. It's just kind of like, if I wear pink, and again, there's many ways that you can produce and assume who you want to be, but things such as the glass that you're drinking your cocktail out of, the color of the fashion you're wearing, the prim and proper way that you carry yourself. I think we can all use a little bit of a calm nature about that. Like, hey, let's all relax. We're going to have a good time. We are ladies and gentlemen, which I have to say you have been a perfect gentleman through all this conversation.
Oh, thanks, Mike.
Absolutely. We did not get to all of your questions, but I wanted to make sure that you had a chance to let people know how to get in touch with you on social media. So please give us your social media.
Yeah, you can find me on BT Parsons. So B as in boy, T as in Tom, Parsons. Instagram is where I'm most active. I'm also on Twitter. But yeah, leave any questions you have, DM me, or my email is available through there, or my website, or comment on any post. And I always do my best to answer. But yeah, I'm sorry we couldn't get, these are great questions. Some of the best ones I've heard yet.
Yeah, Atlanta is, again, like, I think we are a quiet, force of nature when it comes to drinking. So,
I've only been there a handful of times, and I had a blast. Like, we came in barnstorming style working on the book, but that Decatur alone, I went to my parents' basement, and Atlanta, is it Manuel's? Is it the Democratic bar?
In your book, actually, absolutely. I saw that.
There's a picture of it.
Yeah.
So I only had a short period of time, but dipping in those places for an hour or two was great. And I love Greg and Miles, and they're at the top of their craft. So you got a lot of good options there.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you, Brad Thomas Parsons. Congratulations on your award at Tales of the Cocktail. Congratulations on all of your success, on having amazing books. Congratulations in the future for what you're going to do, because it seems like you are able to find stories in cocktails and in this whole idea of how it brings community and culture together. That is something that is just, I'm looking forward to what else you end up putting out there into the world. Folks, again, Twitter, BT Parsons is one of the easiest ways I would assume that you can get to him. I see him active on Twitter. Hit him up. And make sure that, again, if you like what you see, the Decatur Book Festival is accepting your donations. We'd like to thank, again, our sponsors, Whole Foods, Fernet Branca. Shout out to Eagle Eye Bookstore. And make sure you go and cop a copy of Last Call. Make sure you cop AMARO. Cop every book that you can find from this fine gentleman here. Bitters, you see it. Distillery Cats, go the whole route. You know what I mean? Do everything. And we wanted to thank you again for joining us for Culinary Conversations presented by Whole Foods.
Thank you so much. No, I've had a blast, Mike, and I really appreciate your thoughtful questions, and everyone listening. Truly grateful. Thanks so much.
Oh, I only owe it to the fact that we're drinking while we're talking. So I
True.
won't take any credit for that. But I'm going to make one
Fair
of those
enough.
drinks you have because I have everything here. And I'm looking
Do
forward
it.
to showing them off at Morehouse's homecoming, which we can't do in person, but we can do virtually. So thank you for giving me ideas from my brethren. You have a great evening. I hope to see you soon in person. Everyone else,
Likewise.
cheers to you.
Take care.